it's always been. We rise up to the challenge, we give the game our all. With sheer determination, we going for the ball. With the crowd thunders, go Cats, we break the banner down. We know they'll play with courage.
Hi everybody and welcome to BigFooty Cats podcast, episode 2 for season 2016. My name is Willo and somehow I've been allowed to do this again after last time. Hopefully you can actually hear everything clearly this week and the tech issues from the other week are sorted out. Joining us again after a successful debut a couple of weeks ago, we have CatEmpire. Welcome, CE.
Thanks, mate. How are you, Willow?
Yes, very well, thank you. And we've also got a couple of debutantes joining us tonight. Firstly, former mod and one of the legend of our board. We've got Turbocat. Welcome, Turbo.
G'day. How's things, Willow?
Very good, mate. Thank you very much for being here.
Yeah, not a problem.
And also, we've got a very, very special guest, and if anybody is ever umming and ahhing about getting on a podcast, they need to take a good hard look at themselves, because the bloke we've got on now is none other than our LA correspondent, Dazbroncos. G'day, Daz.
Morning, Willow. Morning, all.
Morning.
How are we? It's 2:15 here, mate. I'm going with morning.
Thanks for staying up or getting up, whichever way you went, Daz, to be a part of it.
It was messy, but we're here.
All right, guys, it is... The countdown is basically over. Our opening,
Thank God.
Our opening round one game is a mere few days away, depending on when I upload this, so probably about 3 or 4 days away by the time we're live on air. It's been a long pre-season, it's fair to say. Longer than we've been used to for the better part of the last 10 years. And we're all raring and ready to go, and we've got some good issues to discuss this week. So we're going to lead off with one of the issues that has potentially, you could say, divided the board to a certain extent. The Cam Guthrie debate and where his best suited position is.
The conundrum.
The conundrum. And as we have one of the founding members of the Guth in the Guts Brigade with us, CatEmpire, I'm going to throw to you to make your case, and we'll go from there.
Yeah, there's probably no one stronger in the Guth in the Guts camp than me. I got that hashtag to the top of the list. Very proud of it.
Good form.
Bucket list activity done.
Yeah, but look, I think it really comes down to the way I've seen Guthrie develop as a player over the last couple of years, sort of progressing from a small defender to really what I see as a key part of our midfield, and it's a midfield that has been weak in the last few years, I think, relative to the best teams. But he's a player who's been going from strength to strength. He's still very young and still improving, but I reckon he's probably, as it stands, even with Dangerfield coming in, Guthrie would be our fourth best midfielder behind Selwood, Dangerfield and Mitch Duncan. And I really worry about whether our midfield quality and depth is good enough to take out our fourth best midfielder and move him somewhere else on the ground. And I appreciate that, you know, there are competing needs here, and certainly, you know, you do end up scratching your head about how we're going to find that small defender that will plug that gap for us, given that Buse hasn't really settled into the role. But I worry about the effect on the midfield if we take Guthrie out of there for too long a periods. Sure, he's certainly going to rotate out of there and probably rotate into the back line, but I'm not sure we have the quality in the midfield to take him out of there on a full-time basis.
Daz, do you have what's your take on the Guthrie debate?
I never really got into the hashtag thing, so I'm kind of on the outer on that one. But I think given Thurlow's injury and the lack of progress from Buse in the first, NAB Cup stuff this year, I think we're going to see more of him back there. I agree with CatEmpire's point about not wanting to weaken the midfield because it's been an issue in terms of strength and all that sort of stuff. But if you look at who we actually have as small defenders, the list starts with Buse and what Ruggles has kind of stuck his hand up, most recently, but hasn't really been tested at the highest level that much. So I think we kind of, by virtue of no one else really stepping forward, I think he's kind of going to have to go back there to start with. But I also think it's going to depend on who we're playing as well. I think in the Hawthorn case or with North Melbourne, when you've got the quick, small, or Freo, for example, I think it's going to be more important to get somebody with that kind of defensive mindset and ability back there, and maybe we can kind of skate through some other games where it's not so important.
Turbo?
Look, a lot of what the guys are saying I agree with. I mean, see, he's talking about a weakened midfield, and I've been on about that a bit. But the way I look at it is going back, what would be a couple of years ago when Guthrie was brought into the side, there was plenty saying that they didn't want him moved out of the defence. And I was pretty strong at that time, I thought, to sort of, no, we've got to put him in where we are the weakest. And yet again now, here we are. He's such a versatile player. He's flexible, he's quick, he's agile, which you need to be in the defence because you've got to react so quickly. I don't see any alternative apart from using him where we are weakest again. And that takes a little bit away from the midfield, but I see we've got more midfield options than we have defensive options. And, I did a little bit of a study, we were looking at this today, and I was looking at the sizes of Hawthorn. And, they haven't got anybody over 193. And we're going to have 4 guys over 193. Just about every player on our defence is going to be taller than their opponent. I think we need to put a quality player down there, and that's Guthrie. Now, whether he spends all the time there, I can see him sort of spending a bit of time in the middle, but I can't see any way away from it.
Yeah, I think it's hard. I'm not sort of one way or the other, heavily favouring either side. I think, Daz, you made a good point. I think it's going to largely depend on.
That was my one. I'm done then.
I think you all made good points, but I think the one that probably stood out for me was it's going to depend on who we're playing. I think it's going to be a bit of a horses for courses type situation. I think with Thurlow going down, Guthrie's going to have to play back at some point with the reduced rotations and interchange capping. He's, instead of going to the bench, he's an option to rest down in the defence. There
was one post on the board I was reading before that talked about a make or break game for Buse. It was Cronin that mentioned it, and okay, maybe you can do that, but I'm like, if Buse plays like he did in NAB 1, I dread to think what Rioli or Papolio does. It's you need somebody that's capable of stepping up and crunching Ballantyne like he can.
Yeah.
I don't see any alternative.
I think CatEmpire's kind of point about Guthrie being our 4th best mid, but he's probably going to be our 2nd or 1st best or our best small defender. So it's a case of do you take out your 4? What's more valuable to have? Is it best to have him back there as our best small, or is it better to have him in the mid as our 4th best mid? I don't know. Maybe that's kind of the.
It's an interesting point too, CE. fourth best. Where's that put Motlop?
Oh.
Yeah, I reckon
Running laps.
right now Guthrie is a better pure midfielder than Motlop. That's probably not going to be a popular.
I'd agree with that though.
I've got a lot of time for Motlop, and I think he's a really excellent outside midfielder. But if it was late in the game in a close final and you had to throw either Guthrie or Motlop into the guts to help you win the match, I would go Guthrie every time.
Yep, totally agree.
Yeah.
But what do we classify Motlop as?
Yeah, he's
Fat,
a bit...
apparently.
We'll get to that.
Sorry.
Easy.
Sorry.
He's a mid.
No
He's an
doubt.
outside mid, isn't he? Sort of not. He's not going to go inside and get the ball when you need to, and that's what you're talking about.
I see Motlop. He's a bit of an outside. He's almost the flanker wingman type. He sits
Yeah.
outside the pack, and when he's at his best, for me when he's at his best, he just runs from 50 to 50 all day.
Yeah, exactly.
And he's used as a link-up player. You can tell when he's feeling good about himself and he's playing well because he pulls off those extraordinarily arrogant passes where he looks lazy and pulls it across his body and hits a bloke without even having to break stride. But he's not back on the Guthrie thing. I don't think I'd agree with CE. With Guth is probably more of a pure midfielder. You can put him in. You know he can receive it outside. You know he could win a clearance. You know he can stop another midfielder from winning the ball as well. He's going to be a better option in that sense, I feel.
I think he's mentally strong too. That's why he can play that sort of defensive mindset. He's a guy that you can give the role to and he can focus on it. I'm not sure that's natural for all. I think somebody was talking about, surely anybody can stand next to somebody else. Well, not all people can do that.
He's disciplined, I think, in that sense, and I think that is also part of the argument as to why he's a good fit as a small defender, because he will stick to the task, and I think we saw that in his second year, I think it was, second or third year, third year in 2013 when he played predominantly as a small defender, and he was just even then he just did the job. He just stuck to it. And
I think it was a 213 when we played Fremantle down here.
That was what what I was thinking of. We were,
unfortunately, apart from the first quarter, they towed us up.
Yep.
But he stood really well that day.
He was very good on Valentine, and I think he played on. I'm pretty sure he played on Rioli against Hawthorn in the prelim that year, and beat Tau. I thought he touched him up, or am I thinking of the wrong year? That might have been the year Rioli was hurt and had to come in through the VFL as well. But he did the job that year as a minimum fuss, small defender, very disciplined, just stuck to his guns.
I'd still say, ideally, if we can find somebody that can do the role in the back pocket, move him back into the middle, because I agree, what he gives, he's one of the few guys that almost is like danger in the sense that he can actually burst away from the pack. He creates open space.
He's got a fantastic step too when he gets the ball. That his first couple of steps, he's brilliant at sidestepping, and he's got a good fend on him for a bloke that doesn't look like he's got much meat on the bones as well.
Yeah, there's a little bit of mongrel there somewhere.
I think there's a bit of Sunbury boy mongrel in him. That's no doubt about that.
Apparently he makes a good ice cream too.
All right. I haven't tried it though. Speaking of ice cream and speaking of Motlop,
look at you go.
Look at me. Another obviously often heated debate that we've had over the pre-season was the shape of Motlop. In particular, the shape he returned back from his break-in, which the photos of him were unflattering.
It was a meltdown on those photos, wasn't it?
Oh, God. So, I mean...
Camera angle. No, it's padding. No.
That was a vest.
It was a vest.
Jeez.
So, Turbo, I suppose, what's your take on... Where do you see him at? Where do you see Mott's being at the moment? Is he... You know?
Well, I mean, I've been listening to Yaron stuff all day too, and so it's a little bit like that. I sort of wonder, was he happy once he got the contract signed? Was he sort of been sort of like just relaxed? Is he not quite professional in his mindset? Not sure. We hear all the time that players almost have got to train even when they're not training these days. There was an article I read the other day that talked about how nearly all the players that are playing midfield across all the clubs have dropped kilos. Now they've dropped 2-3 kgs to sort of like make themselves more mobile. So in a way, he's sort of come back and he's got two lots of hard work to do. So I suppose that as long as the message gets across to him that this is not the thing to be doing, because it looks like he was starting to come good at each of those NAB Cup games. I thought he made a little bit of an incremental better performance. And going by last year, I'd say he's going to be in the best 22, even when he's a little bit scratchy. They're going to, give him a go, see how it goes, and he's going to have to play badly to get out of it rather than sort of like drop him at the start.
Oh, he was third in our best and fairest, wasn't he? I think.
Yeah,
third. He's not. I agree with that point. He's in the best 22, but he's. Yeah,
that's last year. What I'm talking about is like when you would have seen just about everybody going past him at training.
Yeah.
But on skill, they'd sort of say, okay, we cannot not pick him. Yeah, we'll scrape him in, or sort of like if he's 21st or 22nd pick, we'll give him that chance. Because even when he's unfit, he's probably one of the few guys that can sort of do that magic thing. But if he's not fit enough to actually run the game out and he sort of embarrasses himself, I can see maybe some hard decisions have to be made.
Yeah, it's. I think it's interesting as well, and not to say that he's, you'd expect him to be dropped, but if what you believe, if what people say and what you believe, the club were unhappy with the condition he came back in, surely he's been given the hard word and told what's required of him, and potentially you could see him. He may have to go back to the VFL for a week at some point if he isn't meeting the standards that are expected of him, and especially if you come back behind the 8 ball, you're not doing yourself any favours, that's for sure.
Yeah, well, that's why I think ultimately it's what he does in the game. So if he's good enough, he's sort of just there maybe, but compared to his normal conditioning, but we'll see how he goes in the game. I mean, if he goes out and he's still 1 or 2 Ks over, but he still plays well, then he's going to keep his spot.
That's a fair call. Daz, what's your take on it all?
I originally kind of gave him a bit of breathing space and didn't think it was that bad. And then when I heard Moons on one of the Fox Footy, I think it was the Freo game, I think Jared Healy was talking about it and kind of asked Mooney and said, what happened? And Moon said, he came back like 8 kilos overweight. That was pretty much the sealer for me. That it was clearly not a vest at that point. I think I agree with Turbo. He's getting better. You can see he's putting in the work. But it's whether it's fully there yet, it's almost going to become a Selwood kind of thing. Is a Motlop at 80% match fitness better than somebody else at 100%? And I think the hard part for him is going to be, as was mentioned earlier, he's best when he's flying, down the wings, breaking lines between the 50-metre arcs and stuff like that. If he doesn't have the gas to be able to keep doing that with repeat efforts, that's going to make him not expendable, but certainly more questionable as an inclusion, given that that's his kind of primary role and when he's at his best. So I don't think he's done himself any favours, but if he, to coin a better phrase, as long as he pulls the figure out and gets as much fitness into him as he can, that the skills and all that sort of stuff are going to come back. So it's just a case of when that happens. Hopefully he's been doing a lot of running in the last 2 weeks.
CatEmpire?
Yeah, look, I'm probably the odd one out here. I'm not really worried at all about his physical state. for a few reasons. I think, first of all, I think that we've got to accept that these guys, while they're all elite athletes, they've all got different makeups, and their bodies react differently to the way they train or don't train, and their diet and everything. And I think Motlop's just a player who will put on weight quickly when he stops training, stops running, but also he appears to be someone who is able to take it off pretty quickly. I think he's looking fit now, and I agree with the comments that he looked better as each game went on in the NAB series. But moreover, I'm not really that worried about whether he's at his best in February, March. I want to see him peaking late in the year. And I think one of the issues he's had in previous years is his tendinitis issues with his knees. And that seems to be something that's behind him now. And maybe, taking it a bit easy over summer is helping in that regard.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Easing the load on his knees for...
It's one of the things I've listed down. I thought, it is one of the reasons why is he's just sort of backed off a little bit, like he's tried to get over his sore spots and it's gone too far for him, or, we don't know, do we? We're going to guess.
Yeah, so...
I think it's also important that we recognise as supporters that, although they're professionals, they need to have time away. And obviously this might be a case of it going perhaps a little bit too far, or maybe it just looks like it went too far. But, it's a fairly intense regime. They're on for 10 months of the year, and you've got to be able to give them a mental break. If that means going away and not training as much or doing stuff, I think you got to allow a bit of scope for that. Now, how much scope is up to debate, but I think you have to recognise the fact that players need to be able to have some form of getaway, and they're entitled to have a little bit of latitude there.
Yeah, I'd agree with all that. I suppose the concern is down the track. We keep hearing it from the professionals how important the pre-season is and putting the hours in and all that sort of stuff. Like a player comes back and he hasn't done the pre-season and then he starts picking up injuries. Well, Steve's shown before that he does pick up injuries fairly regularly. So, even if they're little niggles and he plays on and whatever else, if we're talking about that he's got a hammy or, calf or whatever the heck it is, come July, that's going to be the concern, isn't it?
Yeah, but at the same time, I don't. If he's, I suppose the positive is if he has completed every session and he's done all the work over the summer, then we can only really base it on his condition when he rocks up round one.
Yeah.
And I think when it all sort of blew up, I made a point. I said I thought maybe it was a knee and he'd rested and he'd been told to not do anything for 10 weeks, just completely rest up. And I was shut down pretty quick by a couple of people, I think, suggesting that wouldn't have been told anything like that. But it was just, obviously just spitballing and throwing things out there. But he may have come back a little heavier than the club liked, but I'm sure if he's done the work and if his body's in good shape, then if he can run out the game, that's the most important thing.
Yeah, I agree with that.
He doesn't have to be right to run out the game in October and November. He's got to be right to run out the game on Monday. And then the next 24 or 5 weeks after that, hopefully.
Yeah, right.
And now, that leading into Monday, Easter Monday, we play our traditional Easter Monday opponents and the team that we all hate, generally. Some people love to hate, some people just hate. Some people like VC don't hate, which confuses us all greatly. But obviously the Hawks, who appear to be human
coming apart at the seams.
Human at the moment. They, we obviously Ruffy is out for half the year, and then I think it was announced today that Hill is going to be out for 6 weeks, and Shields obviously broke his wrist or arm as well a couple of the last practice match, so he's also out. So personally, I think when we've looked at the teams, when you look at the teams people are suggesting as potential sides, our side on paper appears to stack up reasonably well. Obviously, we're looking at it with biased eyes as well, but I can't help but feel that if we can't get them now, then we won't get them all year. And I don't know what are your gentlemen's thoughts? What do you see? What do you see? Or what do we want to see to start with? What do we want to see from this week? What do we want to see from our side? Daz?
A win.
Good answer.
That would be the 4 points is what I'm looking for. Correct
answer.
Yeah, really. But I'm not sure that if, I'm kind of one of those half-full people. I don't know that if we don't get the chocolates in this one, that we won't get them for the rest of the year. I think there's still a bit of cohesion that needs to go on with the unit, as the group as a whole, particularly with, Danger and Zach and Hendo and all that sort of stuff. So I still think there's some people finding their feet and, that kind of innate knowing where somebody else is going to be before they're there. That takes time.
You're right. I probably was a bit extreme saying if we don't get them now, we'll never get them. I probably more meant it's as good a chance as we're going to have. Like we couldn't hope. I totally agree. We couldn't hope for a better look at them, injury wise and position wise.
I think, and I've posted this a couple of times. That I think the biggest change between this year and last year, particularly in the Hawthorn games, will be the ruck combination of Zach Smith and Reece Stanley. Just his ability to, first of all, tap the ball where our midfielders are going to get it. And to be able to get a clearance out of there, his on-the-ground work and follow-up work has been really good in the pre-season. His ability to stand up and take a mark, I think he's already got more marks in 3 games than poor Dawson Simpson had in his career. And, I'm saying that a little tongue-in-cheek, but I'm also kind of half serious. He's probably kicked more goals than him. So I think that's the biggest change for me. And then also on the defensive side of that, seeing Hale or McAvoy or whoever push forward and have Dawson Simpson or whoever was the ruck at the time trailing behind because they were out of position or whatever, I don't see that happening as easily. So I think immediately there's a big plus for us against not just Hawthorn but against other sides, but particularly against Hawthorn, who have used that really to their advantage. And it's definitely been a difference between us and them over the last couple of years.
CatEmpire, what are you looking
agree.
for?
Agree with all of that. I particularly, I look at the sides on paper, and I think we're not going to get much stronger, and I think they're going to have quite a few good inclusions, particularly towards the latter half of the year when Roughhead comes back. We won't get a better time in terms of the lineups to get them, but granted, we're going to take some time to gel as a team. But I think the thing I want to see is that we have some sort of plan with dealing with them that's different to the way we've played them in the previous couple of years, because it hasn't worked. And that might have been somewhat personnel related, that we just couldn't match it with them talent-wise. I think there's a lot of truth in that. But I think also we weren't up to it, and we didn't have the answers to particularly their kicking game. So I want to see that we have a plan for that we can apply the pressure we need to apply to force them into error and to win the ball in the midfield and give our forwards a good chance. Because I think if we get it in quickly to our forward line, I think we can put a lot of pressure on them as we used to do, 3 or 4 years back.
I think we used to have a clear advantage with our talls against them, in particularly against their backline. And just to follow up that last point, that you made, CE, about as we used to. I can remember for years we always seemed to be able to just throw Brad Ottens forward and just completely stretch him. And there's nothing better than seeing Josh Gibson actually having to play on someone man-on-man in the goal square. And often he would find himself up against a much bigger opponent. You know, he put it to Ottens and him one-on-one, and he was never going to outmark him. Ottens, the big pill had either pulled down the mark or, because he was so big, he almost negated Gibson's spoiling ability in that situation as well, and it just brought it straight down to his feet for the contest. So
we did it with Pods too, didn't we?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, Pods had a fantastic record with the Hawks, and I think that's obviously I haven't looked at the weather conditions or the forecast for Monday, but I do think that can be an area potentially where we exploit them, especially with Lake no longer there. Lake's had a stranglehold on Hawkins for the last few years. I reckon mentally it got to the point where because there was games late in the last bit where Hawk was dropping simple marks, and I think it was just from just pressure he was feeling. I think he'll hopefully relish the chance to relish the contest without Lake there. And obviously he's looking pretty lean and sharp himself. And he's now obviously a very happily married man. So hopefully that all flows through to the footy on Monday.
I think Lake worried Hawkins a bit. Even when he was playing with the Dogs, I can remember him sort of giving him a little bit of trouble. Something a bit mismatched somehow. But I don't think that's the same with Frawley. I think Hawkins can take care of Frawley.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think I know I used to underestimate how strong Brian Lake actually was. I think his physical strength was something that surprised a lot of people. Definitely got me. And I think Hawkins was kind of one of those people that kind of thought, yeah, I've got this, and then went, oh, maybe not, and I think, like you said, it kind of got to him a little bit. And I'm not sure that Frawley is the same kind of unit that Brian Lake was. So hopefully,
sort of fell into the Kerry Jakovich trap. Do you think? Sort of
a little bit.
Fell into the sort of like, I'm strong, so I want to wrestle all the time.
Right, and I think now that he's lightened up a little bit, and I've certainly in his movement and the way that he's chasing tacklers, and again, it's only pre-season, so you can't put too much into it, but his movement's been a lot better than I think I've seen for the last couple of years. So the ability for him to get away from that wrestling and be more of a leading person and tackling and chasing and defensive pressure coming out of there, I think that bodes well for us as well.
Mm.
So do we see, where do we see, I suppose, our strengths over them? And Turbo, is it what you mentioned, just our tall forwards? Is that going to be where do we win the game? Where's our strengths against them?
I think both sides would be thinking that if you can get the ball in, they're going to create mismatches. Hawthorn's going to think that they can get us with their smalls, and we probably think we can do it with our talls. So obviously it falls back getting the ball out of the centre. So Smith and Stanley are vitally important. Obviously Dangerfield, and then, of course, Selwood pairing for the first time.
I'd just like to credit all four of us for going 10 minutes talking a Hawthorn game without mentioning PFD.
Very good point.
Yeah, we're keeping the powder dry for nowadays.
Yeah.
The one thing I'd say is, we're going to take on with a few players missing, but I seem to think last few years through the year, like when did Hawkins kick 6 and he had Hawkins jumper on? I'm trying to think of who he was playing against, but
Chaney.
That was a total mismatch.
That was against Chaney.
Chaney, that's it.
He just ripped him to shreds in the last quarter.
But I doubt whether Clarkson worried about it because he knew that wouldn't be the matchup down the track. He sort of he does play games a little bit, so it won't really worry him not being 100%. But I look at our side, and even though on paper we might be full strength, I don't think we're going to be anywhere near as good as what we are down the track if we stay fit and stay on the ground. You know,
I agree with that.
because, you know, I go through it and think, okay, how good's Menzel going to be once he's played 5, 6, 7 games? I know that's sort of like, you know, knock on wood type stuff, but either they're guys that are young that haven't played a lot, or they're guys that have come from somewhere else that really don't know us. So once that all melds, you know, even though the names are the same, the side will be 25% better.
Yeah, very good point.
Dangerfield and Selwood are yet to play a game together.
Yeah, exactly.
So, you know, that's going to take some time. Smith is still working out how to feed his midfield well, so that's going to take some time.
And another point, Selwood hasn't played a game with Smith either.
Yeah,
and that's another combination. There's all these combinations that they've still got their old plates on in terms of being with each other, not in terms of being footballers, but and probably that's part of the reason that the Hawks have been such a high benchmark for the last few years is their midfield has basically stayed the same, and they are to the point where if Mitchell grabs the ball, he knows automatically where Lewis and Hodge and Smith and all those players are going to be. Probably before they even know where they are, he knows where they're going to be because it's just
they've just played so much with each other.
Yeah, exactly. It's just a learned behaviour now.
It's like what we were 5 years ago.
Yes, absolutely.
Exactly right. Yeah.
As much as I hate to say it, to their credit, though, they've also done it without each one of those guys that you just mentioned for, 4 to 6 week periods as well. Hodge has been out for, had we'll call a long-term injury anything over 4 weeks. I mean, even last year, Mitchell was out, Hodge was out, Lewis was out. They've been able to slot somebody in. Granted, it might only be one player at a time, but they've still been able to get that continuity going. And it's, as much as I hate to say it, you've got to respect them for that.
Oh, and no doubt that part of their strength is their system. And if one person goes down, they back themselves that they've got someone else that will step in, know what's required, and be able to perform the role. Maybe not at the high level of the person they're replacing, but can still perform at an adequate level that the team doesn't lose anything. What are our biggest concerns coming in to Monday?
Well, for me, one of the concerns, I suppose, is what we saw in NAB 1. If we press up because we're conscious of don't let them breathe, we've got to be on them, because if you let them have the ball and it's all easy stuff on the outside, they're going to kill us with the foot skills. Okay, so really sweat on them, be in their face. And we do that to our nth degree and overcook it. Well, what's it going to look like when we're going Rioli versus anybody all by themselves in the forward line? We've got to be really aware that we want to press but don't overdo it or always have coverage. I think C was talking about fixing it in Game 2, and to a certain degree I think he's right, but we've got to make sure that we press but don't over-press.
Well, I think that's exactly right, Turbo, but I think the good thing is that we didn't really see that again aside from that quarter, or not at least for a sustained period in either of the other matches. That sort of problem we had in that third quarter against Collingwood, where it was clearly just the structure was all wrong and the tactics were wrong. But I think to our credit, we didn't see that again, that problem, and I thought they got the balance much better for the rest of the series. And I thought they had the back set up a lot better as well. They weren't getting sucked up the ground. There was always 2 or 3 defenders back still, or capable of getting back, which is what you want to see, because I know we are going to play that style of game where we press up, because that's how we think we can beat teams like Hawthorn. So we will see it, but we do have to have that insurance of players those last 2 or 3 players not getting sucked in. And I was heartened that we didn't see that problem again in NAB, and I hope we don't see it again this week.
I think as well, part of that third quarter, the problem with that third quarter, it was a bit of a perfect... Collingwood had almost a perfect quarter where, if I'm remembering quickly, and it was up the other end of the ground from where I was sitting, so I may be a bit sketchy on it, but it seemed like they kicked 11, but it seemed like 5 or 6 of those would have been snaps from a kick out of the middle, and it wasn't as if they ran the ball the length of the ground and got it up and over our press. It was a quick clearance, and the ball had hit the ground, and they were snapping goals from everywhere that quarter as well, which potentially, they just seemed to be, every shot was going through for a goal, and that can exaggerate as well at times.
I don't think it was every goal. Just from memory, I thought there was maybe 3 or 4 goals like that. I mean, like Mackie even gave a gift goal at the end, so you knew it was going down the tube.
What I meant, was it probably a large part, it just seemed to be the quick clearance and a quick contest snap goal, and there was a burst of goals like that. So the third quarter didn't actually, for me, wasn't the concerning part about the press. It was the rest of the game where they were moving the ball from defence to their forward line, and they were just splitting us open. And I took a photo and posted it up on the board saying this is how they lined up all night long.
I remember that one.
And the really high line, and you could see they were clearing the ball from the half-back line, and they had the 4 closest players to goal as well. And that was alarm bells for me. But then the next game against Essendon, I think very early on, Essendon a few times kicked the ball forward, and there was 3 or 4 of our blokes there ready, set up, ready to go. So I was heartened by that, because it appeared, obviously, potentially we were just trying something the first game. The second game, we'd started to correct it. And I didn't have too many issues with NAB 3, the way we set up. Granted, I was a bit under the weather during that game, so I didn't take it all in properly.
Do you think, though, that possibly in what we've seen is, and one of the criticisms of, and I'm not going to get into a big Chris Scott thing, but one of the criticisms has been he doesn't really have, or seems to not have, like a plan B. Maybe we've seen part of that in these 3 games, that there are now options that in game styles that they're going to change. Now, obviously, one of them didn't work well for the third quarter there, or appeared to not work well, but maybe they're more willing to have a look at changing something and having 2 different structures or 2 different ways of playing. And when something's not working, maybe this is an example of, we've seen 2 different game styles in 3 different games over the pre-season. Maybe they're cooking something up that to at least have options to change things, whereas before it's always been, no, we're going to stick with what we've got and that's it.
But that is what the NAB challenge is for as well. It's to try those things, yeah.
I know everybody looks at sees something different, I suppose, but I mean, I think we've been running on Plan B for about 2 or 3 years because of our lack of rucks.
Spot on.
The criticism of Scott, he doesn't do this or doesn't do that. Maybe it's fair, maybe it's not, but the way I looked at it is he's always been sort of like trying to do stuff with his arm behind his back. He's never been able to have the side that could actually win it from the middle and go full on, let's roll the dice, kick goals.
Well, he did have it in 2011.
Yeah, well, that's... I mean, it was sort of, we're going back sort of
but I mean that further
4 or 5 years.
That further makes your point, I think, as well.
If last couple of years you can see by the recruits, he's trying to bring in stuff to cover that. Obviously, not all of it's been a work, but I think with Smith and now meshed with Stanley, and we've got extra height on the side, you can see he definitely does not want to go in there with playing, like a Walker type in the ruck anymore. So fantastic. He wants to play Plan A and then switch to Plan B or C if he has to. But Plan A is kick goals.
Absolutely.
I think as well, I heard Scott, I saw him interviewed on one of the Fox Footy things last year, and they talked about what if it goes wrong, do you have Plan B? what does the coach do in this situation? Potentially, it was during the finals when he was on the panel for the finals, and he said they don't like to change what they've planned because they spend the whole week working on a plan. They train for it. They spend the whole week setting themselves for this. And he said, you've got to, I think he was talking about the courage in the coach's box to, they've got to stay firm with what they believe they're trying to do. Because if they've spent a whole week training, preparing a certain way, in the first quarter, if they all of a sudden rip it all up and start again, they've lost their whole week's preparation. It's not an ideal situation for the players and for what they're trying to do. And I know it's one of the footy fans' favourite, or the Geelong supporters at the moment's favourite argument is, we don't have Plan B. But like, it's not under 12s. You don't just move the forwards to the back lines and the backs to the forwards. They would be doing things differently that average Joe football fan would not even realise or pick up. They would be implementing changes midway through quarters and constantly. So I'm a bit...
apart from an occasional, let's just roll the dice and put like a backman forward for a one-off type thing, you're normally lining up with the best player in what you think is his best position.
Yes.
So, 15 minutes into the game and it's not working, do you suddenly think, I'll put the second best or the third best player in that position, or do you trust your best player?
Yeah.
I think the other thing...
Most of the time they're going to keep trusting, and maybe sometimes they just trust too long before they, go and make the change. But I doubt that you're going to sort of like, throw the whole baby out, 10, 15 minutes into a game because it hasn't worked out.
Yeah, that's it. CatEmpire, you were going to jump in there?
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think the other thing I've heard Scott say, and I think it has a lot of merit, is that despite what the fans think, the coaches actually have limited ability to swing changes other than positional changes. You can send player A from full back to full forward, but in terms of changing the game style and tactics during the game, the coaches are far more limited in their ability to do that than the fans appreciate. And that is down to, as you say, they train a particular way. They've got an overarching game plan that they use for the whole season, basically. And to think that you can just flick a switch and start playing a different way and coordinate 22 guys to play a different way is quite unrealistic. And what Geelong was able to do in years gone by, when we had that core of players, Corey, Enright, Kelly, Ablett, Bartel, etc., the list goes on. There was, 15 of them who played their whole careers together, was they just knew they had the ability to play the way they wanted to play and to beat anyone. And they knew if they stuck at it, they would eventually click and get it right and roll over the top of everyone. And we can't do that anymore because we don't have that same core of players. But that takes a long time to build, and I think that's probably not... there's some impatience in the fan base that I think is a bit unfair.
Well, that just put an end to a 340 page thread.
And I'm not gonna wait in there and post it either.
Oh, that's all right, I'll do it. And I think the point
I'm going to get my broom,
get your hammer ready. I think a point then as well was just further following up with the point how they train for the week. I was fortunate enough 2 seasons back, maybe 3, to go to the Inner Sanctum training as part of the then Varco sponsorship, and we were playing Richmond that week, and they trotted us into their room with the big screen and the sort of the auditorium, I suppose, and Troy Selwood stepped up the front and said, "This is what we're going to do. This is why we're going to do it. This is what Richmond do. They like to do this with the ball." And I think it was something like Martin Deledio and Cochin. He goes, "Only ever handball it when they want it back." And they show all these examples, and you think about it. Now you'll start to notice it when you're watching the footy Thursday night. Obviously, Delidio's not playing, but Cochin and Martin, they will handball it to someone who's a metre or two away purely because they just want the ball back again. And they love their 1-2s, and they look at this, and then they say, so we're going to have extra numbers around the contest in this particular area, and we're going to train this way, and we're going to do that. So they spend their whole week, every drill they do for the week is constructed to allow them to be able to do to either, cover off something the opposition does and turn it into a strength for us on the weekend. So to then turn around on a Saturday and say, oh, all right, guys, we're not doing that. Let's swap this around. The players are drilled in for the week as to what they've got to do. And like you said, they can't just flick a switch and change it all up for 22 people. Just as easy as that. Daz, did you have any other thoughts on, I suppose, now that it's turned into a bit of a Chris Scott discussion?
I was actually just going to head it back towards the upcoming game.
Go nuts.
As an expert at steering things away from the Chris Scott minefield.
Take us back to Daz.
Well, you'd mentioned that, what were the concerns about the game coming up, and one of the things I was thinking of was hopefully we're getting away from, even though we are probably the tallest team in the league now, that we're actually going to get away from just the high, long kicks into the forward 50. I know that's kind of counterintuitive given the fact you've got, potentially you're going to have Vardy, Hawkins, and maybe a Stanley or Smith down there resting as a forward or however it works out. But just because you've got all that down there doesn't necessarily negate the ability to lower the eyes and hit up somebody else or somebody leading. I hope that's the trap we don't fall into. It hasn't worked for us recently, and hopefully just because they've got taller targets down there that doesn't become the crutch that they can continue to keep doing. If that makes any sense.
I wonder if sometimes the kicking it on their head's been a result of our struggles in other areas. Within Turbo mentioned, Scott's had, if you're looking at a game plan with one hand tied behind your back,
yeah, absolutely.
Are we throwing it onto the boot a bit quicker because we are lacking the ruckman, the assistance for Joel to help get the ball free from the contest, and often we're finding ourselves under more pressure than potentially we could be under, and blokes under pressure are more likely to kick it quickly and not as accurately, and therefore you can tend to just bomb it long to your forwards.
Well, that was one of the things I really liked about the Freo game was the goals kicked by the smalls.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I tend to think that, even if you have a win, okay, kick it along to Hawkins, he takes a mark, it'll work once or twice before they start double teaming him, and they'll shut that down. But you've drawn a man to you, so then it's up to somebody else to chip in. So that's the time to go short, or that's the time to look at the alternative. Where we sort of play dumb footy is we just keep going to the person because it's worked last time. So when Link kicked all those goals, I thought now we're starting to look like what we wanted because we've got alternatives. We can look for the pass. We can look long. Do we play McCarthy and Gregson to sort of play the high press? Not sure, but we're starting to get there.
I just like the multiple goal kickers that we had too. It wasn't like, I think Vardy kicked 4 in one game, and but there hasn't been like the same person every week fronting up and kicking 3 or 4. It's been 10 or 12 goal kickers coming in and getting 1 or 2 each, or however it's worked out. Whereas I think recently seasons we've had more of a reliance on kind of 1 or 2 people to kick the lion's share, and that's going to work well for us as well going forward. It's spreading that load around because then defenders just don't know what option we're going to take.
Yeah, there's got to be 2 changes to our scoring this year. One's got to be that there are now 3 players who are going to spend a lot of time in our forward line this year, fingers crossed, who haven't spent much time at all there in the last, over their whole careers really, but that's Vardy, Menzel and McCarthy, all hugely talented players, and I've got no doubt if they spend enough time in the forward line, they're going to kick a lot of goals. The other part of it, I think, is we haven't got enough goals out of our midfield, and the best teams have their top handful of midfielders kicking, at least in the teens, but preferably in the 20s and above goals, and we haven't got that out of our mids in the last couple of years. We know that Selwood's capable. We know that Motlop's capable. We certainly know that Dangerfield's capable, and he's going to add in that area. Even Caddy and Duncan are capable goal kickers, but we need them all to be hitting the scoreboard every week, because it can't be all about forwards being on the end of a chain. We need our midfielders to be winning the ball and getting forward and kicking goals.
Absolutely.
Yep.
And I think that's obviously another area that Hawthorn have just excelled in the last too many years. They have a whole swag of midfielders that all seem to get on the scoreboard more often than not as well. Now, you touched on our skipper there, Selwood, CatEmpire. How are we feeling about his conditioning and him going into this game? I mean, there has been probably a largely one-sided discussion about the merits of playing him and everything this week. Are we happy? Are we all happy and confident and comfortable with him playing based off a VFL practice match?
This week, I think it's just a non-discussion. I can't believe there's even one person questioning it. Although maybe I should believe it, given who it was. No offence, mate.
Hi, Blighties.
What it means for not just this game and beyond. I think that it's a fair call to say there's got to be a bit of uncertainty about whether his conditioning's up to it and whether he's able to have an impact in this sort of first quarter of the year, I'd probably say. But we know he's such a professional. I saw some vision of him yesterday or today playing that VFL match. He looks fit, and I heard Chris Scott say it's not like he hasn't been doing a lot of running. He has been doing a lot of running. So that's got to be a good sign. He might be quiet. He might be played forward a fair bit over this first few games, but I'm pretty confident, given who he is and his determination and his professionalism, that he's still going to have a big impact.
Daz?
Yeah, I think the 80% match fit Selwood is probably still going to bring more to the table than most 100% fit footballers. So I think that's reasonable. I think the other thing to consider too is we're talking about match fitness. We're not talking about a dodgy hammy or something. So it's all reports are that he's kind of past the plantar fasciitis and the tendon issue in the other foot. It's literally just a match fitness thing, and I'm taking that on face value. What's coming out of the club, so I think that's a consideration as well. And I mean, maybe this will inadvertently be a more effective Joel Selwood if he does only get, say, 6 minutes instead of being, a full-time midfielder and not really resting other than going to the bench. If he's now getting sick, a 5-minute stint in the guts, and then he rotates forward and sits for 5 minutes, but in that 5 minutes that he's back in the mids again, he's actually just giving his full 100% because he knows that he's going to get a break resting up forward. Now, I mean, break is a relative term in the game these days, but if that makes any sense, maybe this is a way that inadvertently gives him more impact, if that's possible, in bursts rather than just, his full output in the midfield all the time, if that makes any sense.
Turbo?
Look, I think he's such a competitive beast. Like if he was half fit, if his legs screwed on by, being held with duct tape, whatever else, he's going to want to play that first game, and he wants to line up next to Danger. The thing is, he's probably even feeling better than what he did at the end of last year, because he looked woeful at the end of last year. I think he even said he shouldn't have played the last game. So apart from match fitness, he's probably feeling a lot better. So if we have to plonk him in the forward pocket, he's still going to be a very dangerous player, even being a little bit down on match fitness. And I don't think it'll be 80%. I mean, like, it might be 90 or 95. I mean, like, who knows the exact percentages. But to me, he's done 34 touches, even in a VFL comp. He's shown enough. He's in.
I think you made a really good point then about how it could have done him good. I think potentially the break, if he had to have a forced break, it may not be a bad thing for him, because at the end of last year,
it's probably been the longest break he's had.
Yeah, and probably for the second half of last year, he looked pretty average. He just didn't look. I think it's just the years of him carrying the side, basically.
He's getting pretty frustrated because the side was playing poorly and he wanted to do something about it, and he didn't have the tools to do it because he was crook.
Yep.
So you could see it. I mean, that's why he got reported that time. He's just getting frustrated.
Yep, and I think potentially the break could have done him good mentally. He'll be as fit, I've got no doubt. If he's been running and training, he'll be as fit as fit. Match fitness, he's the first contest he goes for, he's going to blow up. That's going to happen until he's had a game or two under his belt. I find match fitness may mean that a player fumbles or isn't as clean, but I find Joel to be one of the cleanest players with the footy that I've seen, in that I reckon what sets him aside from so many players is his ability to be going at full speed and to just control the ball with one hand and not fumble. He's very clean. He doesn't make many mistakes. I can't see that happening. I think he'll spend more time forward than perhaps he would have if he'd completed a full pre-season. But the points that have been made again and again on the board is that, a 70-80% match fit Selwood is still better than, Kirsten, Cowan, Lang, whoever else, and he's going to command the respect of a better opponent as well, which the flow-on effect from that can also help. If he all of a sudden gets their best small defender, then it could open up the door for a Kirsten, a Lang, a Gregson, a McCarthy to maybe get more freedom than they may have otherwise got.
It sort of plays to what Daz was talking about, I think, before, in the sense that if Selwood's up there in the forward pocket, they certainly aren't just going to bomb it long to Hawkins or something. They're going to see him and they're going to pass it to him.
Yep.
I don't think there's too many back pockets that are out there that'll be, when the huddle breaks and people start going to their positions, all that sort of stuff, will be jumping up and down with joy when they see the 14 heading towards them.
It's the same. It's
very good point.
The same as Dane Swan playing down forward for Collingwood. Good players are good players wherever they are, and Dane Swan, like Selwood, they're both good one-on-one players. So if you get the ball to them one-on-one enough, they're going to win it more often than not. They're good, smart footballers. If they're in the forward line and they're winning it, they're going to hurt you on the scoreboard. And that's
agreed.
Hopefully the way it works out for us on Monday.
Looking forward to Joel getting a couple of high tackle free kicks inside 50 just to
I hope he starts on the ball and he gets the first kick of the match and shrugs into it and just to wind up the Hawk fans. But
the vision I saw in the VFL, he was already getting a couple. So
yeah,
I'd like him to duck into it just to really wind him up, because we know he doesn't duck; he shrugs.
Awesome.
All right. Question without notice. One last question without notice. Do you guys have? Can you name, or do you want to name, or a tip for an X Factor type player, someone that may not be your expected, star, but someone who might just do something on Monday that we might all be very happy with come Monday evening with what they've done during the day? Has anyone got one? I've got one in mind. I'm happy to start since I've given you literally 2 seconds notice for this question. I'm looking forward, hopefully, to Nathan Vardy
You stole me thunder.
having an impact because... No, well, I thought of this question before when you mentioned his name, Daz. I think Vardy is... He's... For all the shit I give him as well, for being not able to take a mark and having concrete hands, I think his marking improved each game for the pre-season. If he actually puts his arms up a bit above his head and runs at jumps at the ball, there's not going to be too many defenders that can stop him because he's going to be a long way up in the air. He has the knack of getting into dangerous positions and finding the football in his hands. So that's my tip. With Hawthorn's defence as it is, for all he'll go to Hawkins. Gibson, who's Gibson go to? Does Gibson go to Vardy? If he does, and Gibson's third manning up all the time, I could easily see Vardy strolling in for a few goals. Much the same style that Hawthorn like to do it, where they just find themselves strolling into an open goal square and getting it through.
For someone his size, he finds himself in space, within 20 metres of goal, a ridiculous amount of times.
Yep.
It's uncanny, and you have to give credit. It's not by accident. He manages to get in the right spot. So good call.
Is there anybody else that have expectations from that could light
Well,
us up?
I'm thinking that perhaps you've got going to be a lot of emphasis on Dangerfield and a fair bit of emphasis on Selwood, perhaps when he's playing in the middle. So perhaps Caddy actually does one of those little bursts a bit more often and kicks a couple of goals, because he can do that and suddenly have all the attention elsewhere, him to step up and actually play almost like a vote-winning game.
Yeah, I actually think, seeing my first preference was Shark, I was thinking maybe Mitch Duncan might be a bit of the, it's hard to say Mitch Duncan's the quiet achiever, but with all eyes on Dangerfield and Selwood and maybe Zach Smith and these other new recruits and stuff like that, I think it's possible that Mitch could slip in there and certainly have a bigger game. And maybe get less attention and be able to get off the chain. He's a smart footballer. He knows where to go. His skills are elite. I'm not calling him elite, but he's certainly well on the path to getting there. And I think he could actually get off the chain a bit and give us quite a boost. Yep.
CatEmpire, does anyone...
In the spirit of picking players, we've been a bit hard on Willo. A player who I reckon's bobbed up a couple of times against Hawthorn and done some nice things is Jordan Murdoch. And
nice, good call.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he was the other one I was thinking of.
I've definitely been hard on him over the years. Well, I don't know. Maybe not hard, but I think it reflects that I see a lot of potential in him, and don't see the output that I hope we could get from him. But I think he has bobbed up a few times against Hawthorn at the G. I think he seems to like playing on the G where there's a bit more space and he can use his speed a bit more. And he's kicked a few goals against Hawthorn. I can see he's kicked 3 on one occasion and a couple of 2.
3 on the final, wasn't it? Was it 3 in the final?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, he had that prelim, he had a good game.
The prelim, yeah.
Yeah, that was the one where they come back in the last quarter, mate.
So he's one bit of a smoky, but I reckon he could bob up.
Very good.
And I think you've got to pay homage to Lincoln McCarthy, to Rabs, to the Rabbi's favourite pluck from the draft back in the day. He's come in and certainly done everything that was suggested he could do. Granted, it's taken a couple of years to get there, but certainly looking forward to seeing what he does. Presuming he gets selected, but you'd think he'd be in now.
He'd have to be. He was one of my picks of the NAB. Obviously, Danger. We knew what we were going to get. Zach Smith, I was wrapped with, but if I had to round it out to a top 3, McCarthy had to force his way in because he's everything we've been in the practice matches. He's everything we've been crying out for in a small forward.
Yep.
Agreed.
On practice match form, hopefully he carries it through.
Yep.
I want to get one that actually can kick a goal instead of miss from the goal square.
Well, he's kicked a few. He's warmed up in the practice matches, so he should be fine.
Yep.
I think that's about covered it all off, guys. Thank you very much for joining us. Now, is there any other messages or anything else, any advertising any of you want to do while you've got the chance?
Hashtag Guff in the guts.
Oh, that's hilarious.
Thank you very much again, CatEmpire, for joining us.
Thanks for having me again.
No problems. And Turbo, thank you very much for joining us for your debut.
Yeah, not a problem.
And lastly, Daz, probably time to go to bed, mate.
Go to bed, Daz.
Thanks very much, Daz, for.
That's all right. This has been good. This is my pre-season, so getting ready for the games.
Well, that's you. We've warmed you into it.
Yeah, done nicely. I'm sure I'll be hurting tomorrow. Don't worry.
All right, we will be back again. Well, look, last time I said it probably wouldn't happen for a month, and it would happen within 2 weeks. So 2 to 4 weeks, we'll be going around again. So if anybody would like to be involved, I highly recommend it, or would really appreciate people letting me know that they want to be involved. If Daz can get up at 2 a.m. and do it, I don't think there's any excuse for any of you other people sitting here listening in. So
yeah, but clearly I'm a couple of singers short of a picnic, so you know.
Oh, you've just confirmed there's no mystery now, Daz. We've heard you.
Nah, absolutely.
Thanks, everybody, for listening. Hopefully this time you've been able to listen to it on iTunes if I've been given access to put it up there. And otherwise, we'll speak to you again in a few weeks' time. Thanks very much,
Cats.
everyone.
All right.
Thank you. Go Cats.
Go Cats.